So I'm just going to take something from your bio, which goes, Barry is a winner and he works with winners. A proud native of the Caribbean island of St. Kitts, the artists he's worked with have sold millions of records worldwide, and Barry has collected countless industry honors, including 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards, 1 Hall of Fame induction, numerous Juno Awards, SOCAN Awards, MuchMusic Video Awards, Canadian Urban Music Awards, a Bob Marley Award, Arts and Entertainment Award from St. Kitts Canadian Association, a large number of certified gold and platinum plaques, and many other industry honors. Mr. Barry, welcome to CBMA.
Thank you, brother. Wow, I sound pretty good.
You are pretty good.
Wow.
This is enough for a lifetime, and you're not even retirement age yet.
No, not even close. I'm gonna be retired when God decides I'm officially retired.
Okay, I got you. Now, tell me, with a bio like this, Ivan, did you ever say, okay, maybe it's time to just hang up my hat, buy a boat, get out there in the water, and just enjoy the rest of your life and not have to think about work?
Phil, that's actually a great question. I have bought a boat. I did kind of somewhat move to the Caribbean because it's just such a beautiful lifestyle, etc. But never will I hang up my hat when it comes to music, the entertainment industry, the cultural industries in general, because it's a part of me. It's a part of my DNA. It's what I spent, most of my life since I was 15, 16 years old doing, and it awarded me for me to travel the entire world and learn and witness different cultures, experiences, musical genres, meeting amazing people like yourself and others around the world, etc. So I could never retire from a business, let's call it a business or a lifestyle that has awarded me greatness. So no, I will never retire. My doors are always open to help anybody that needs help, to advise anybody that needs advice, etc. However, I slow down a bit. I pick my battles, and right now my battle is getting the Caribbean, which it's so funny because not to be long-winded, but it's so funny because most of the artists that I've worked with in Canada, like 98% of the artists, it's either from the Caribbean or of Caribbean heritage. So it's not that I've so much given up on Canada. Canada is well on its way. We have some of the most amazing artists, chart-topping, selling millions of records, etc. But the heritage of a lot of these artists are within the Caribbean. So I wanted my next battle to be the development of, certain Caribbean genres and certain Caribbean artists, because they deserve to have a global platform. And other than reggae and dancehall, there's not really a global platform for many artists. And so I am willing to help governments, I'm willing to help artists, etc., get to that stage. So that's the purpose of my focus in the Caribbean.
Now, we here in Canada, certainly myself, have known you for over 30 years, and I've watched you grow, starting with, the management side of things with Dream Warriors. But how did you get your start in the industry? You said as a teenager you were already involved to some extent?
You know, my start was very simple. I moved from St. Kitts when I was 15 years old in 1979. I had the passion and the joy of looking at a calypso band called Ellie and the GI's Brass as a young child, sitting on, you know, Coca-Cola bottle cases, looking at them rehearse in St. Kitts, and said, this is what I want to do. People like Ellie, people like Mick Heiliger, lots of other people in that band just really like the talent, you know, just really freaked me out. You know, the talent really freaked me out, and I said, that's what I want to do. My parents moved to Canada. I came to Canada, and during those teenage years, I was a DJ at a roller skating rink in Ajax. And I met the most brilliant people in the world, which is Rupert Gayle, who is still my partner today. And I still manage his career, one of Canada's top songwriters. You know, Len Grant, Richard Rodwell. And we started, we had a funk band before BeatFactory. It was called Traffic Jam.
I remember
and that was our success, right? And we used to play at the Bamboo Club and the Horseshoe and, you know, clubs down on Parliament Street and etc. And then obviously LA Love, which is Rupert's brother. We used to rehearse in their mom's house, and he would say, you know, you guys got to start doing hip hop, man. You know, don't be just a funk band. You got to start doing hip hop. And at the time, I mean, you're talking about now 1981, etc. You know, the only thing kind of I knew about hip hop was like, you know, a hip to the hop to the hip of the hop to hip hop. You hop, you just don't stop to the bang bang boogie, the up jump, the boogie to the boogie to the boogie the beat. So I'm like, wow, okay. So me and Rupert and the rest of the crew said, hey, let's try it. And we tried. You know, you're talking about the early days, even before the Dream Warriors. You're talking about Crush and Scad, you know, MC Force, you know, of course, Michie Mee, which is, you know, one of the most iconic female artists ever came out of Canada, you know. And so those were the early days, even in a little bit of dancehall with Carla Marshall and stuff like that, you know. HTV, you know, and the list goes on. So many artists that we dealt with in the beginning stages. And I gotta tell you, it changed my life. It really did, because I came out personally from the funk, disco, R&B era. But the culture of hip hop, and really being entrenched to this day. I think Rupert Gayle and I still thank his brother, LA Love, for exposing us to that, because the level of passion and the lyrics and the want and the need to express themselves, you know, it was mind blowing. It really was. And obviously, thanks to people like Ron Nelson, who played all of the songs on, not just played the songs on radio on CKLN, but also allowed the live performances at concert hall and stuff like that.
As a promoter.
And it's so as a promoter. And I remember the days when Michie Mee and LA Love, along with a few other local artists, can do, you know, 1,500 people at concert hall based on flyers that was given out to high schools when the security will come and chase us and we'll call the cops and etc. Because that was the only means of marketing, is CKLN, the Fantastic Voyage, and flyers. So guerrilla marketing, flyers on Young Street, flyers in all the high schools, and the people will show up. And the passion they would have you know, for this music. And it was true hip hop, because it wasn't just about rapping. It was breakdancing. It was graffiti. It was the full spectrum of hip hop. That level of passion as a young man coming from a Caribbean island in St. Kitts, it truly blew my mind.
So let me ask you this. We know of BeatFactory as being, you know, groundbreaking as a label to expose Canadian rap artists. How did that come about? What were you thinking at the time? Was it due to the kind of enthusiasm that you were seeing with these young people?
Yes, totally. It was totally about LA Love and his friends and all the acts that we got exposed to. As I mentioned, the Crush and Scads, the HDVs, the Forces, the Michie Mees, like back then, way before the Dream Warriors, which is, you know, one of, if not my most successful artist from a global point of view.
Yes.
But it was their passion. It was where they were in life, young. It was where they were living. Most of them in various, you know, ghettos, so-called ghettos in Toronto, and their voices needed to be heard because the lyrics they wrote was a matter of fact and opinion and uplifting and what was happening from a social point of view, from an economical point of view, you know, from a musical point of view, from a cultural point of view. And these are all people where their mom and dad were just moved from the Caribbean, like mine, to give them a better life, you know, and then you kind of ended up in this place and you're like, you know, oh man, you know, yes, you know, healthcare is free, education is free, etc. But why am I in this concrete jungle when I could be under a coconut tree? So they had things to say about that.
Absolutely.
You know, so the beauty about Canadian hip hop that I will put over any other hip hop anywhere in the world, because I've traveled the world and hip hop is in every country in the world, as we all know. You know, and I've met some brilliant artists from Germany and Romania and, you know, Japan and Hong Kong, etc. They're hip hop artists everywhere. In the Caribbean, there's so many hip hop artists. But the beauty about the Canadian hip hop, it was this thing that parents moved. They had young kids with them. Those young kids moved when they were 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. Now they're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Their mom was vacuuming the carpet while listening to reggae, country, jazz, folk, blues, right? The spectrum of American music, but you had something to say in your hip hop way, which was rapping.
Yes.
And you blended it all with your influences from your mom's weekend vacuuming on a Sunday, or cooking a chicken soup or something like that on a Saturday. And you blended all these cultures and musical genres and made it your own. America could never do that and still can't.
Well, you know, it's interesting you say that, Ivan, because just recently here in Toronto, there's an exhibit on hip hop culture that came from the States. And, you know, it attracted a big turnout, needless to say. But I think there's also now a lot of conversations that are being had about telling our own story. And you just summed up one of the biggest differences between American rap and the culture that, you know, that flow from it versus what we as Canadians produce. No one has ever put it quite that way.
Well, it's so funny, you know, because I do a bunch of lectures And I remember this one lecture in the Caribbean that I needed to do. And it was when Obama's first term, and his first, one of his first, if not his first trip, certainly one of his first trips were the Summit of the Americas in Trinidad.
Okay.
Right. And I was invited to do a speech about the cultural industries in the Caribbean. And my speech, so I did a lot of research. This is the only speech I did any research for, because normally my speeches is I just kind of show up, you know, have a beer and then just talk, you know, but I'm like, oh, come on. These are you know, prime ministers and presidents from South America, Central America, North America. I got to come a little bit better than that. Okay. You know, and I did a lot of research, and my speech was mostly about the music industry, the cultural industries, etc. But I based it on hip hop. So I did a bunch of research. The amount of American, I mean, Canada is obvious. All Canadian rappers, 90% of them, 99% of them are of Caribbean heritage. Okay. But when I started doing my research and get into the KRS-One, the Busta Rhymes, the Biggie Smalls, the list goes on and on, the Albie Shores, whether it's hip hop, R&B, or the influence of hip hop and R&B. The entire Black music industry of hip hop and R&B was pretty much of Caribbean heritage. Not the entire, but you know what I mean. I know.
There was a significant amount. You named a whole bunch of them right there. Yeah. Yeah.
A significant amount. And when you look at what's happening even today, you know, whether it's Afro beats, you know, and Afro beats did this thing. The African artists, I'm so proud of them. I'm so excited for them that they're doing their thing, etc. We're influenced as Caribbean people by African music, but there's no doubt that the young African artist is heavily influenced by hip hop, dancehall, reggae, which is Caribbean, you know, of Caribbean descent. Absolutely. You know, and these things, these genres that's coming out of these, it's like throwing a piece of dynamite in a room with 3 songwriters and seeing what happens. And what happens is this nuclear bomb of creativity that is, oh my God, it's orgasmic. That's what it is. That's what it is. So, and that is what's controlling the charts today.
Now, I would think that would put you in a great position, given your knowledge, you know, starting with Traffic Jam and all those other acts in the early days, to where you were, you know, the most important executive, as, you know, the co-founder and CEO of BeatFactory. Give me the short version of what made you decide to start BeatFactory.
I think the only reason Rupert Gayle and I, and Richard Rodwell and Len Grant, those were the 4 members, original members of BeatFactory, and then Rupert and I continued on for many decades after. The number one reason, the only reason for starting BeatFactory was hip hop. Because we had Traffic Jam. Rupert was the lead singer of Traffic Jam. We were happy doing our funk. Rupert was singing on a vocoder, like, you know, like Morris Day, you know, and we were having fun, you know, and when we did performances, it was great. But hip hop, you know, created this ambience in our life that was so culturally significant, and so dynamic, where we felt that we could change the world through these artists' lyrics and performance and cultural experiences, etc. That we could change the world. We could use it, you know, as a tool for conversation, for implementation of changing of laws, of politics, of social acumen, you know, of vocabulary. You know, you said it all. I mean, hip hop is where it is today. And we saw that at a very, very early age, 1984, 1985, 1986, you know. And so the number one reason, the only reason for hip hop was BeatFactory. It wasn't about R&B and funk, you know, because we had Traffic Jam. Later on, of course, we started doing, you know, compilation albums like GROOVEssentials, etc. You know, I tip my hat to, yes, of course, you know, people like Wado Brown, Aaron Isaacs, Carlos Morgan, like the list goes on of the most amazing R&B singers that ever came out of Canada. You know, Harvey, and you know, these amazing musicians and vocalists, etc. But that was not the purpose and or the focus of BeatFactory. It was definitively hip hop and what hip hop did to our lives.
Now, let me ask you this. You released the album, you know, the first compilation album. Can you give us a sense of what that impact was when you did it? Because you also took it on the road. You guys had a tour.
We did, yes. You know, I tip my hat to my staff. You know, when Deane Cameron at EMI Records, I mean, way before that, I had a label deal with A&M Records where we had groups like Split Personality and Organized Rhyme and stuff like that. But a significant turning point was Deane Cameron at EMI, you know, and I remember that conversation well. And the person that sparked that conversation and that negotiation was Denise Donlon. I was receiving my first Lifetime Achievement Award from the Black Association. Sorry, I forgot the acronym now, but the Black Association, etc. And they asked me to invite, you know, who I wanted to invite. And at the time, I was close to a lot of people, so I invited a lot of people. But two people that I did invite was Deane Cameron and Denise Donlon, because I had a relationship with EMI, and I had a relationship, obviously, with MuchMusic, with Rap City and Electric Circus and Extendo Mix and all that stuff, you know. And I'm sitting in between of Deane Cameron and Denise Donlon, waiting for my award, and there was a whole bunch of performances, both hip hop and R&B. I can't remember all who performed, but I do remember Melanie Durant performed.
Of course,
I do remember that she had such a fabulous voice, you know, and a bunch of other great artists performed. But I remember where Deane leaned over and said, "Oh my God, I didn't realize that this level of talent existed in Canada." And I do remember Denise Donlon said, "Well, why don't you give Ivan a label deal so he can nurture them?" Right? And Deane said, "Is that what you want to do, Ivan?" And obviously at that time, I think we had Dream Warriors and EMI. They had Left Island Records. Yeah, so I had a relationship, you know. And I said, "Well, let's talk about it," you know. And so Denise sparked the interest. And I tell you where Denise came in later, in Rap Essentials 1, 2, etc. I went up to Deane's office at EMI and I said, the only way I would do this is we are going to do, Rupert and I are going to do compilation albums. And he said, "Well, why compilation albums?" And at that time, compilation albums were doing great. You had, you know, the K-Tel stuff that was coming out. You know, you had Chris Shepard killing it with those comps. The MuchMusic comps were killing it, etc. And I'm like, You know, I think the Beat Factory artists are well on their way and they're on their path, etc. So me taking all of the funds that EMI gives me to dump into existing Beat Factory artists will do great for Ivan Berry and Rupert Gayle, but will not do anything for the scene. It'll just be another successful artist. I could have taken all that money, picked an artist, dumped it into them, shoved it down the media and the public's throat, and it would have been a success back then, for sure.
Okay.
You know, and I said, no, you know, there's so many more talented, not more talented, but there's so much talented people out there that don't have a national medium to showcase their talent. And at that time, you're talking about Choclair, Rascalz, Cardinal Official, like the list goes on. The Danny O's, the, you know, and forgive me for not naming everybody. I'm 61 years old.
Of course.
You know, but yeah, Regent Park was represented. Jane and Finch was represented. Like everybody was represented, you know. And I said, so Deane said, and I said to him, I said, I do not only want to represent artists, I want to develop executives. So the only way I'm going to do this is I'm going to do compilation albums. If you give us a real budget to license these music, because I wanted them to continue owning their own stuff, do videos, do commercials on MuchMusic and on radio, and tour. And Deane agreed. I said, and I remember saying to him, I said, we want rock and roll budgets. Right? And he said, you got it. And I said, the second thing is we don't want to be up in the EMI's office. We need our own staff in our own offices. And of course you could have, you know, a label manager, etc. Back then, believe it or not, Lisa Zabitnu, who ended up being my president when I was the head of A&R for Sony-BMG and for BMG, yes. She was the head of marketing at EMI. So she was a big part of that, huge part of that, right? So I said, I want my own staff and we're going to do our thing. So came out of that was so many, Jonathan Ramos, L.A. Love, head of A&R, Jonathan Ramos, Stefan Lecuyer, yes. Dwayne Watson, yes. You know, Agnes Chung, you know, oh man, I can't remember all the staff, you know, Amansa Trotman, you know, and there was about 10 of us in a room on Spadina Avenue doing what we did.
That's a big staff, isn't it, for indie?
It was the most amazing step that many other labels couldn't figure out how we accomplished it. We accomplished it through hip hop because hip hop was being so aggressive and was so culturally diverse that I don't think that anybody, including Deane and Denise, could have denied it. Because I think that Black music in general was a huge part of the success of MuchMusic.
Now, I've never heard anyone...
So much so that they had 3 shows. Three shows dedicated to it.
What were the shows? Rap City, Soul in the City?
Soul in the City, Extendo Mix, and 80% of Electric Circus.
Got it.
So 4 shows.
You knew that, but you had to educate both of those individuals who obviously supported you about the possibilities.
Yes. You know what Denise did? When we signed off on the deal, etc., I went back to Denise and said, okay, Denise, you created this shit. You need to step up. She said, well, what do you want me to do? I said, we're going to take out ads. and for every ad, I want a free ad. And Denise said, for every ad, you get 2 free ads.
Hello.
So we had a 30-second commercial on national television 3 times in an 8-hour slot that repeated twice to make 24 hours.
Can I ask you about that? Because, you know, a lot of films are now being made. A lot of people are doing research about the Canadian scene. And I would imagine that your phone is on fire with everybody who wants to talk to you. We appreciate you taking the time out to do this, because we're creating a Black music archives, which we believe is essential. Because a lot of the artists, you know, once they, you know, exit stage left, as the expression goes, nobody hears about them, you know?
Yeah.
And how do we motivate and inspire the next generation that Ivan has done it and maybe I can too?
Yes.
What is the impact of BeatFactory and MuchMusic, do you think, has had on the Canadian hip hop scene?
I think we certainly contributed, you know, to the success of the pathway of hip hop in Canada from a recorded point of view. There were so many artists that was performing, rapping, etc. And then there were so many artists that was putting out vinyl. But people have to remember that those artists in 1992, 93, 94, 95, when the era of when BeatFactory started doing RapEssentials and that sort of stuff, and you know, you had brilliant artists like Cardi and Shockley, and the list goes on. There's so many amazing artists that they came 10 years after BeatFactory.
Wow.
Right? There was BeatFactory, and there was my good friend Farley Flex and Maestro Fresh West,
Yes.
and which also had artists like Kish and stuff like that. But we were doing this in the early to mid 80s. Right? I mean, when Michie came out with Scott LaRock and KRS-One and MC Light and the first priority record deal on Atlantic Records, you're talking about 1987.
Wow.
1987.
Wow.
Right? When Dream Warriors came out, 1989, global hit, million records sold. You know, nobody's ever broken the Dream Warriors sales record until Drake came along 20 years later.
I didn't know that.
Of course, Maestro had the first platinum record in Canada. So he got that record, that's for sure, and props to Maestro, you know. But Dream Warriors sold the most records worldwide of any rap act, any Canadian rap act, for 20 years, until people like Drake and them came along.
That's pretty special. So,
you know, and of course Cardi was doing this thing also, and etc. But I'm talking about touring in 50 countries around the world. Gold records in places like England and plaques in Spain and Japan. You know, was Dream Warriors. This was the 80s. You know, HDV signed to ISBA Records on Sony. Carla Marshall, Crush and Scad, you know, signed to Fort and Broadway Records in the UK. Rumble and Strong, signed to G Street Records. You're talking all before 1989.
I just read the first paragraph of your bio, and we haven't talked yet about what you did outside of the success of Dream Warriors and BeatFactory. You also shifted your focus to the Caribbean.
Yes.
What kind of transition was that for you? And How successful was that transition, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, after the success, obviously, Dream Warriors, Michie Mee, BeatFactory, etc., I took a little stint and went on to be, the head of A&R for Sony-BMG.
How was that?
For BMG.
Tell me about that. Tell me about that before we get to that. Because I remember you were Sony-BMG.
I was with BMG for a good while. And then obviously the companies merged, so it became Sony-BMG. So that's how I ended up with that. But, again, it was Lisa Zabitnu moving from EMI to be the president of BMG. And then Keith Porteous, who was an A&R guy there, they met with me and they said, we would love for you to be in the A&R department and to be the head of international. And one of the reasons why they suggested that is because I had so much success internationally, releasing records in Germany, in England, in America. I mean, I had the success of all those artists, Rumland Strong, Question Scad, Carla Marshall, HDV, Dream Warriors, Michie Mee, released in numerous territories outside of Canada. So they're like, wow, this person is kind of on fire internationally. So they wanted me to be the head of international and A&R, develop artists. And I remember saying to them, it's a funny story. So Lisa is coming down to hang out with me in a few weeks. We're still great friends. But I remember sitting in the boardroom when they're offering me this position. And here am I, an independent label. At the time, that was anti-major label. I understood that my artists needed to be signed to them, but I was anti-major label because I didn't think they understood the genre of music well enough to properly market it, and in some cases didn't care enough, to market it. We were creating a buzz, so we had to be on their roster, but I didn't think that came from a genuine point of view. And I'm talking in general, major labels. No individual specific, but in general, the major labels were very big rock and roll, country and western machines, but there's this little genre called hip hop that's creating a big stir that maybe some of the executive kids loved, right? So it couldn't be denied. But do I think that the executives went home and put on hip hop records? No, I didn't think that. I didn't think it was part of them, right? But it was a good business plan, and respectfully. And I remember sitting in the boardroom and I said to Lisa and Keith, that's not my thing, man. I'm independent. I need to do what I need to do. I said, however, I will give you guys 3 to 5 years of my life in this position. And they say, why that time period? I said, you know what? I've negotiated a lot of contracts in my life. I've sat in a lot of boardrooms in my life. I've sat in the same boardrooms with many major labels in my life. And I want to know what the real books say. I know what I negotiate. I know what they've given me, but I don't know if that's fair or not. And the only way to find out if it's fair is if I'm all up in the mix.
What was the reaction?
The reaction of Lisa was, and that's why we want to hire you, because you are that sort of thinker.
So you're a closer, and she closed you.
She totally closed me. She totally closed me. So, and in that role, there's people like Keisha Shante that came out of that role. After Keith left, Keith signed the Rascalz, but after he left, was in the head of the A&R department for Rascalz, same as Ghetto Concept, and many other, Sean Desmond, many other brilliant artists, but of course Keisha Shante was my baby. You know,
Yeah.
that's who I founded at 14, 15 years old and got in the team, you know, Rupert Gayle and Perry Alexander to co-write with her and write with her and develop her. And, you know, that was my baby. And I'm so proud of her today. I mean, she is an iconic brand today.
Yes.
Forget about just music. She's on television. She's everywhere.
Yes.
You know, so I'm so proud of her. And I'm so proud of that person and people like Jen Hyland and Daniel McKinder that helped me develop Keisha, and they're still so very close friends with her today. You know, Jen Hyland is at Universal today, and Daniel McKinder is doing his marketing thing, but I couldn't have done it without them, you know, and many others. But that's why I took that job at Sony-BMG, at BMG at the time.
And then how would you say you left them? You obviously left them in a great place.
I left them in an amazing place. My next transition was trying to perfect publishing because I thought I knew everything about publishing. I knew nothing about publishing. All I knew is that BeatFactory needed to be a house. Maybe some people thought it was greed, that we needed a house of management, label, publishing, marketing, etc. It was never about greed for Rupert and I. What it was about protection. It was about housing it under one roof. The way I saw people like Chris Blackwell at Island Records and, you know, Barry Gordy at Motown and all the greats that came before me.
Yes.
Housed it to protect it and to nurture it and to develop it in the most authentic way and not allow the big system of publishing labels, etc., to diffuse the authenticity of it, right? That's what it was. So the next move after my stint at BMG and Sony-BMG, a matter of fact, Lisa walked down to my office the week of the merger and said, "You are now the head of A&R for Sony-BMG." And I'm like, oh my God, because at the time it was, if not the biggest, second biggest to Universal.
Universal, yes.
Label, Sony-BMG. That week, Robert Ott, who is still my good buddy today, got funding from the Teachers Pension Fund to start Ole Music, or Ole Publishing Company.
And then
that same week,
you got involved.
That same week, Robert came to me and said, "Oh man, we're starting this company. I want you to be a very small equity partner, and I want you to head up international, to look for acquisitions, to sign and develop songwriters." And I'm like, oh my God, you know, I had to go to Lisa because I thought my phase at Sony-BMG was over, not for any other reason other than knowledge. And I've done what I could, and I've gotten what I could have mentally. And the next step was publishing. And I think my timing was there, and I went and I sat with Lisa, and obviously she was sad, but we're friends today because she also understood and loved that I wanted the growth as an individual, and not just as an individual, but as a prominent Black executive in the music business. That's why Lisa and I are still friends today.
That's pretty amazing.
And at the same time, Robert didn't want to ruffle any feathers, so we had a triangular negotiation because for the next 3 months, for the next couple of months, I was the head of international and equity shareholder of Ole, and I was the head of A&R and international for Sony-BMG, and we had to work out the transition because I wasn't going to leave Sony-BMG in a disarray. And Robert understood that. and I wasn't gonna, you know, and Lisa understood that I had to go over to Ole. So I actually shared my office hours. And I don't know if that ever happened in Canadian history, but between my two good friends today, Robert Ott and Lisa Zabitnu, I worked it out, and it was a smooth transition.
Got it.
And so I went on to Ole, and I learned a hell of a lot over there of acquisitions and catalogs and music publishing and how it worked. And Robert built an amazing company that became one of the biggest independent music publishers in Canadian history today. I mean, it's not Ole anymore, it's called Anthem. But that was Robert Ott's baby, along with his partner, Tim Lang. And I was the first employee, the very first employee.
Impressive, impressive. Now, let me ask you, this is for the benefit of those who are learning about this music industry, and you obviously have had loads of experience in that. I once heard someone say music publishing is the sweet spot of the music industry. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I didn't understand that back then. You know, I signed publishing agreements with my writers, again, based on not understanding publishing, but based on control, right? Based on, this is our thing, and we're going to house it all here. And then when we think it's ready, we're going to pass it along to the majors, right? So I didn't quite understood publishing back then. But I do think, well, let me back up. It's the sweet spot if you're a great songwriter. Let me give you an example. The success of Rihanna has nothing to do with Rihanna writing songs. A matter of fact, in my humble opinion, it has everything to do with Rihanna understanding she's not a songwriter, but she's a mechanism for these brilliant songs. And the brilliance of Rihanna as an individual to say, I'm not a songwriter. I could do a business deal. Maybe I'll get piece of the publishing, etc. But I'm not gonna try to write a song and demand that I sing the song that I write if I'm not a great songwriter. I want the best songs in the world to sing.
She knows her lane.
She knows her lane. And I without knowing the inside information, because I don't, I could, from the outside, look and say, that's her key to success, is understanding what she does well. She is the, what Jay-Z say? Tropical princess. And she's a brand. And when she walks into a room, the room stops. And when she shrugs her shoulders, everybody looks. She's a brand. She's not a songwriter. You know, and she worked hard at her vocal ability, at her live performance skills, of her brand, of her fashion. And she worked hard at that and let the songwriters be songwriters and pick the best songs to sing. So publishing only works when you're a great producer-songwriter.
Got it.
It doesn't work when you want to hog the album and write mediocre songs just because you're the artist and want to make it into a financial thing, because songwriting lasts forever and intellectual property earns royalties forever. When that becomes your motive, it could destroy your career as an artist when you're singing mediocre songs based on financial interest.
And ego.
And ego. Obviously, and ego.
Yeah.
So if you're a brilliant songwriter and you're a brilliant artist, then obviously you're a double threat, and you add some performance into that. So the Bob Marleys of the world, the Mick Jaggers of the world, etc. The list goes on and on, right? Yes. Then you become a triple threat. And I you know, that's the brilliance. So for me, that's Dream Warriors. That's Michie Mee. That's Crush and Scad. That's HDV. All those artists that if they came out today in new formats, the brilliance of them, you know, would be massive. The only reason these artists, the Rupert Gayles, etc., are not billionaires today was based on we were paving roads. We were not driving on the highway collecting tokens, collecting, you know, what do you call it? What is the 407 collect? What is it? What's it called?
I got you. It's the 407.
When they collect the money on the 407, what's that called?
The poll. Tolls. Toll, yeah.
Right? We weren't collecting tolls. We were paving the highway. That's why the BeatFactory artists are not billionaires today.
Let me ask
we were driving the trucks, laying the asphalt.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Ivan. It's probably not easy to sum up. It might be in your book when we get together on that, if we get together on that. But what would you say has been the biggest impact of BeatFactory?
From which perspective?
Well, you talk about laying the groundwork, but laying the groundwork, I think when we talk like that, I pick up a BeatFactory poster with all these artists who've been there. There's so many artists there that when you look at it, I mean, I lived through that as well. I was publishing Word at the time. But do you ever stop and say, man, Rupert, you and I did that, bro?
Yeah, definitively. Rupert has been my lifelong partner. We're talking now 42 years. Right? 42 years. Rupert Gayle has been my lifelong partner. And what a lot of people don't know is that Ivan Berry was the face. I did the interviews. I did the thing. I did the Ivan Berry thing for BeatFactory.
Yes.
Ivan Berry's never made a decision without Rupert Gayle. Without communication and or involvement. He was my rock, right? Because Rupert is quite a different personality. He's a very quiet guy, very stable guy. He's a listener, but when he hits you with the statement, and hence makes him one of, in my opinion, one of the greatest songwriters. He's passionate. It's you know, it was a brilliant balance of two individuals that met in a very young age, teenagers, that had two different personalities. People forgot that Rupert won a Juno Award as a singer, as an R&B artist, Rupert Gayle. He has a Juno Award as a singer. When he won the Juno Awards and the media came down and the girls started screaming, he said, I don't want to be an artist. I want to be a writer. And I'm like, are you crazy? I just ordered the Lamborghini. Like, we're going for it. Yes. Right? You're going to be the biggest artist. You know, you just won a Juno, you know, because that's what we all thought, that you win a Juno, you know, you're set for life, right?
All the doors open after that.
All the doors open, right? And he's like, it's not my thing. I don't want to be in the forefront. You know, I want to write great songs for great artists. I don't want to be the artist. I don't want to sign autographs. I don't want to do interviews. I don't want people screaming at me. And most importantly, I want a life. I don't want a public life. I want my life. That's the cool conversation. That's the conversation that Rupert and I had. Rupert won the Juno Award and the next week quit as an artist. and
Wow.
became a songwriter.
Wow. You know,
I mean, he was always a songwriter. He was always a songwriter, but became a permanent songwriter. Now I wasn't looking for record deals. Rupert was on A&M Records. Now I wasn't looking for record deals for him. I was looking for publishing deals for him. So Jeff Kullerwick at Warner Music Publishing, Warner Chappell, signed him. And then, you know, Robert Ott at BMG Music Publishing signed him. And then later on, Robert Ott at Ole signed him as a writer. So
wow.
that was his transition as a songwriter, but it was based on him winning the Juno Award and saying, I hate this shit.
Ivan, I'm going to have to bring you back, my brother, for round 2.
No problem.
To talk some more, because I know there was a whole other life in terms of Caribbean music publishing. Your company, C2W, was traded on the Jamaican Stock Exchange. These are impressive achievements, and we'll try to set up a time where we can do this again. But thank you so much, my brother. You're a shining light for a lot of people. No problem. And continue to be Ivan Berry.
But listen, before you go, Phil.
Yes.
For you and your viewers. I've been sitting in a car for the last
hour.
hour, but this is where I am.
Okay. I'd love to come and join you one of these days, man. And look.
Hold on, these are my friends.
Yes.
Hold on, Phil.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ivan Berry's Hangout in Anguilla. Thank you, my brother.